HBO gave me all 6 episodes of A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms in advance. And as I sat down to watch them and was like, 30 minutes each, basically, that made me very nervous. I wrote at the top of my notes, does this feel like Game of Thrones? Because, of course, it's another show in that franchise. And what unfolded before me as I watched these 6 episodes wasn't as grand as Game of Thrones, but was far more meaningful. I'm so excited to talk to you about this show. So as a fan of medieval fantasy stories, when I was growing up, I got into a lot of different mythologies and histories and stuff like that. We were recently talking about Greek and Roman mythology with the Odyssey, and we talked a little about Egyptian. You guys brought that up too, and I loved that as well. And I went through my medieval phase, and I had a lot of beautifully illustrated storybooks. I'm still drawn to those beautiful paintings. And at times, I marveled how this show, more than any other Game of Thrones show, felt like those paintings come to life. I was like, look at the raindrops on the tree leaves as the knight walks by. If that sounds great to you, then you are going to be excited. But it's not just the visuals. The story here absolutely blew me away, because it starts out just as like a good time at the tournament, and then it turns into something much more serious. If you've read the novella, please do not spoil it, because it was really great to see this story unfold. Now, the timing for A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms could not be better, as it's a story about why honor matters and the complicated hard truths of what it means to be a man. A lot of Star Wars fans took issue with how the Acolyte disrespected the Jedi, George Lucas's Space Knights. And while I intellectually understood that complaint at the time, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms made me feel it in my bones and in my heart. I was like, this is beautiful. And it's a little sad to think that this is what if the Acolyte or a Jedi-focused show, because the Acolyte was supposed to focus on the evil people, thank you very much. And I thought, until up through episode 5, I was enjoying that. And then it just really did fall apart. But this is beautiful. This is so good. Speaking of timing, not only is there an issue with men feeling abandoned these days, I don't know if they always handle it the best way, but I think that's definitely a real complaint and issue. But common decency, I think we all can agree, seems to have left us, with the cruelest, unkindest men seeming to thrive. So A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, which represents the opposite of that, and it's so beautiful, couldn't have come, as I said, at a better time. So welcome to my non-spoiler review of what I think. And I even emailed the PR department as soon as I finished watching the episodes. I said, this is one of the finest shows you've ever produced. I'm sure some of you are like, how can it be so good if these episodes are only around 30 minutes, Grace? And I understand your skepticism, but I'm telling you, it's amazing. So yeah, they are that short though. They don't feel short though. The first is a little bit longer. The first is around 40 minutes. Oh boy. But yeah, they're all around 30 minutes, which is why the show airs at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time instead of the hallowed 9 p.m. spot. When they announced this would air at 10 at first, before I knew the length of the episodes, I was like, this is a dessert? It should be the main meal. It is weird. It's paired with Industry Season 4. And I know some of you really love that show. And no disrespect to you. But the fact that this show is does an amuse-bouche come before or after? But the fact that this is just like a little after-dinner mint to Industry when it is just peak storytelling in any medium or format is nuts to me. But, here's where we are. Like, it's just, hopefully maybe the show will pick up momentum if people don't watch it right away. I urge you not to be dismissive of this show, because it's just so, so good. It does seem to be kind of coming out of nowhere, but it's amazing. Here's what it brings to mind for me. I had a lot of feels and thoughts and emotions while watching this. So on the lighter side, it reminded me of yet another HBO show, right? Where Succession, where Logan Roy told his son Kendall, I only remembered the second half of this quote. And so to look it up again and to see the first half was, life's not knights on horseback. Oh, hilarious, because I'm talking about knights. But it's a fight for the knife in the mud, right? Or just a knife. Well, this is that, because it's a realistic take on knights. After all, Dunk is a hedge knight who fights for no banner and lives in the hedges. He's homeless, basically. But yet violence, of course, is the great equalizer to all knights. All knights are on the same battlefield and have the same results when they are attacked. Wow, some of the violence here is shocking. And then the other thing that this show reminds me of is the very famous quote, supposedly from Edmund Burke, and that's that the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. I think people have always thought, since those words were spoken, I think they've echoed in our ears. And that sentiment is so, the show doesn't start out that way, but it evolves, it escalates. And to then eventually see it personify that statement is an incredible thing to experience. Be like, how the heck did we get here? Which is what Dunk himself is wondering. But it's beautiful. And I'm so excited for you to go on this journey. But yeah, I got to binge it. I watched the first episode, the one that's like around 40 minutes, and it really held up well on its own. And I felt I got enough. I took a break. I watched the one episode. I went on with my day. I usually tend to watch screeners for my lunch break. So the next day, since their episodes are so short, I was like, okay, I'll watch 2 of them back to back. But then at the end of episode 3, I was like, I'm not stopping now. So I watched the first episode on one day, and then the second day I watched 2 through 6 straight in a row. I just went right through it. I had to find out what happened next. But, I had the same experience with It Welcome to Derry. I got to binge the first 5 episodes of that show, 5 of 8. But still, even though I got to binge it as a critic, it was so fun for us to experience that show week to week. That's what I think sets the HBO shows apart. Not only quality from other streamers, but this viewing experience, the discussion that they're still able to generate. So many of us are like, what are we watching now? What's on this Sunday, HBO? And I think that's really wonderful. Again, does feel weird that the main discussion's supposed to be industry, but hopefully people, sometimes with these shorter shows, people might watch them the next day for breakfast or on your own lunch break on Monday. That would be beautiful for this show. I think you're going to be surprised how good it is. But despite the shorter runtime, I do feel that each episode of The Night of the Seven Kingdoms feels like its own thing, full of fantastic moments, great performances, and little Game of Thrones Easter eggs that are just enough to make you feel like you're watching something that takes place in that world, but still allows this to be its own thing. I think the beauty of watching it week to week in these half-hour chapters is that you really get to think about it and mull it over. I mean, they're so beautiful and so poignant and so, as I said, so full of meaning that I think it's going to be really great for us to kind of digest this together. So you could wait 6 weeks. It's not that long. It's only 6 episodes and binge the show yourself. But I wouldn't. I hope that there is a weekly conversation, and I think you're going to want to be a part of that. And I think you don't want to have some of these things spoiled. Even if you've read the books, some of the way things are framed and shot, I think, are really nice to experience as a surprise. Like little things that are for sure going to show up as like a GIF or a clip on social media, and then it'll be ruined for you. Because when I was watching it, I was like, oh, isn't that nice? What a wonderful choice that was. And it hit me with the feels. So you want to have that experience too. So yes, A Night of the Seven Kingdoms does feel like it's part of the Game of Thrones franchise, but it's not as much like the original series as, say, House of the Dragon is, which really does feel like a continuation of that show, even though it's a prequel, but you know what I mean. This, I think, is refreshingly different. Here, the soap opera elements have been stripped out. Don't worry, though, there's still nudity, male nudity, some of it pretty shocking. The opening of episode 2, I was like, wow. For HBO, we have certain expectations at this point, but I think HBO managed to top itself even there. That's going to be on social media for sure. I don't know if it could be. It was just so nuts. And this, though, is a smaller, more intimate story, right? We're not following several storylines like we did in Game of Thrones and as we are in House of the Dragon. Here, there's just one story being told, and that's the story of Dunk and Egg. Now, fans of George R.R. Martin's work who have read the story already, I I think I worry that they're going to spoil some of the reveals. There's one that's kind of obvious, and the show doesn't hold it back for that long, because I think anybody watching would be like, I suspect something. So I'm glad that they didn't take too long to bring that to the forefront. But again, even if you have read the novella, I think that the magic of the telling, as I said, is what's really special. The nuance, the drama. Again, as I said, there were several things where I was like, that's beautiful. You couldn't have done it better. And that was so nice to see. Just little small moments, which are great. But you know what? Think of the greatest stories about men and honor, like war movies and Westerns, right? And of course, stories about knights. Although there've been a lot of good books about knights, and there are some funny movies about knights. But I don't think there's ever been a movie or show about knights on the level of the stories we've gotten about men at war or in Westerns until now. You actually learn a lot about knights, which I really appreciated. And one of the coolest thing here is seeing how a tournament works as the show takes place during a tournament. So you actually go into depth on that, as in Game of Thrones, we would only have a couple of scenes here and there, and they were usually just the matchups. Here you see registration, what they do during the downtime. I thought that was all really great. Also, the tournament here, the way it was set up, reminded me a bit of the Roman arena. And I think A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms cleverly borrows a lot from Gladiator. And it called that to mind for me several times and would do the movie proud. I think that this show is as good as the original Gladiator, I think. The directing here is excellent, and the acting as well. We're going to talk about the cast. But I think that what impressed me the most, and of course the acting and the directing service that, but it's the writing. The writing is just really phenomenal. And there were several monologues where I was just like, whoo, that was good stuff. The kind of stuff you worry doesn't exist anymore as we get more and more pulled into IP and nostalgia baiting. And this is IP. So the fact that they're still able to deliver these monologues where you're just like, whoo, that's why people become actors and why people enjoy stories. I mean, it's just really incredible. Another huge difference from Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon here is that instead of focusing on the nobility, for the most part, I mean, there are some nobles here and there, but A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms focuses on everyone else in the Seven Kingdoms, the regular people. Or as George Bailey says, hey, it's right after Christmas. I watched It's a Wonderful Life twice this year. But as George Bailey says, the people who do most of the living and dying around here. Someone who would just be an extra in those other shows is a major character here, or at least a major supporting character. And I think that makes the show very relatable. We'll see how people receive it, but I suspect it's going to go over quite well. I hope so. There are a few female characters on this show, but this is really a show about men and how they interact with each other in the best and the worst of times. And while some, again, as I said, some nobles come into play, the dynamic is like when an officer interacts with enlisted soldiers, kind of like that. And the show is incredibly well cast. What a find with Peter Claffey. He is an Irish rugby player turned actor, and he's had a couple of roles before this, but whoa, talk about a huge career boost. He really is 6'5", and he, for somebody who didn't start out being an actor, he's a fantastic actor. So much is asked of him here, and he meets the challenge. He is Dunk. It's incredible, and I think he'll become a huge fan favorite. Also, as we lose Hopper, thankfully the next generation of dad bod has arrived with Claffey definitely getting the HBO treatment. Oh my. Dexter Sol Ansel as Egg is good. In fact, very good. At first, I wasn't sure. His delivery in the first few episodes is kind of stilted, and I was like, I don't know how I feel about this, but it's for you. Well, you'll see. And again, no spoilers. Be careful about spoilers. Although, but anyway. By the end of the show, I came to like his character quite a bit as well. And this duo was really fantastic. We've seen a lot of duos like this lately. And of course, there's the iconic Batman and Robin. And, you might have I think at this point, we're all like, another one of these. But this is so well done and so good. I really like it quite a bit. Bertie Carvel. Ooh, I love Bertie Carvel. I'm a big fan. And I'd forgotten that he was cast on this show. He doesn't work that often. But then when he popped up in my screeners, I was like, oh, yay. And he's fantastic. If you didn't see Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, you're missing out. It's very Doctor Strange coded. It's not as good as this show, but it's very, very good. I think it's right now available on Prime. You should check that out. It's really good stuff, particularly if you like that kind of, British Doctor Strange type fantasy kind of stuff. He is, as you'd expect, quite good here. Are you a Bertie Carvel fan? Our numbers are few, but we are strong. Well, Daniel Ings, another familiar face if you watch a lot of British television, he gives the show that Game of Thrones flavor because he's the depraved Sir Lionel Baratheon. Very Game of Thrones coded, his character. But he has a few surprises in him as the show progresses. I came to really love his character. Now, there are also some great character actors here who have fantastic supporting turns. Sean Thomas as another squire who Dunk can relate to, as he was also just recently an adult squire. Adult squires, they're a thing, and they're as frustrated as you would think. They're like, this is a job for little kids, man. Why am I still doing this? Tom Von Lawler, who manages the tournament. I loved his look. He just added such flavor to his scenes. He was great. And wow, Danny Webb as Dunk's former mentor, an absolute mess of a hedge knight himself. You know, where the show and Webb take this character, it's got to be seen to be believed. I would not even believe it if you told me at the start. I'd be like, no way. But by the end of the season, I was just like, I think Danny Webb might get nominated for some acting awards. It was just incredible. It was incredible what he did. A Night of the Seven Kingdoms has already been renewed for season 2. And since this show is smaller in scale, right? It's interesting. It kind of reminds me of what Andor is to Star Wars, although that was a much more expensive show. There's no dragons here. There's no big castles, and you would think you would really miss those things. Similar with Andor, you're like, where are the lightsabers, man? They're like, Tony Gilroy doesn't like lightsabers. And you're like, that's nuts. But with season 2, particularly of Andor, who cared? And I think it's very similar to what's going on here. Although thankfully this is a much cheaper show, right? With only basically one location. It's much more limited, but they make it really work. So because it's smaller, the next season is set to maybe drop in 2027, which is very exciting. I would love to add another yearly show to the rotation, right? To join the Pit and Slow Horses, particularly when the shows are of this caliber. I think that A Night of the Seven Kingdoms fits in very well with the Pit and Slow Horses, and I would love to see that be the case. Finally, I want to point out that while this show is a beautiful love letter to men, it's not made only by men. Now, of course, three of the 6 episodes are directed by Owen Harris, who directed several iconic Black Mirror episodes. I mean, what a resume, and he delivers here as well. But the other 3 episodes are directed by a woman, Sarah Adina Smith. And also there are 2 women prominently featured on the writing team, Annie Julia Wyman and Aziza Barnes, who the show is dedicated to because she tragically passed away in 2024 under difficult circumstances. And I would urge you to look up these creatives. Always know who's making the content you love as well as who's starring in it. This is one of, as I said, the best things I've ever seen anywhere. But HBO is certainly on a roll right now. And I hope that Netflix truly understands the responsibility they're taking on if they are allowed to purchase HBO as they would like. Because this is just incredible. It does stand side by side with the first Gladiator, in my opinion. So that's my non-spoiler review of The Night of the Seven Kingdoms starting this Sunday on HBO. Again, share those thoughts down below. No spoilers. Subscribe today. And of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.